my colleagues on the panel.
Great, thank you so much. Let's throw it over to the Chicago campus to meet our panelists there.
Hello. Can you hear? Okay, perfect. Hi, I'm Jill Glenn. I'm the Director of Community Partnerships here at the Chicago School. And I came to the Chicago School in November of 2006 when the department first started. Prior to that, I worked for a child welfare agency for approximately 17 years.
Hello, everyone. I'm Belinda McPeters, the AVP for Academic Affairs with oversight for the National Center for Academic and Education Excellence. I've been with the Chicago School since 2012, originally as a dissertation writing expert with the IT program online. I held that position for about a year and then transitioned to the AVP for Academic Affairs. I'm really glad to appreciate the invitation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Patricia Arredondo from the Chicago campus, but I am in Orlando at the American Counseling Association conference. And I am campus president in Chicago. It's a delight to be part of this leadership panel today. I've been with the school 2 years in February, and having been in other locations as a tenured professor in a couple of universities, and then coming primarily from research universities, but always working with graduate students. And that's what is such an attraction at the Chicago School. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks so much. Let's throw it over to the DC campus. Campus, are you muted by chance? Technical difficulties. Perhaps in the meantime we can go to our online panelists. I see Dr. Barbara Kelly on the screen. Dr. Kelly?
Hi, can you hear me? I'm actually speaking to you from the northern Michigan outpost of the Chicago School near Traverse City, Michigan, where I live and work. And I actually have a little kind of an interesting history with the Chicago School. I may have an opportunity to talk about this, but I actually was a student in the clinical PsyD program at the Chicago School in 1980. And if anybody knows the history, you know that that was 1 or 2 years after the program began. And then I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life and I transferred to a different program. So there's another story. I guess I came back to the Chicago School to do some work through some unfinished business. So then I came back to the Chicago School in 2007, and I've had a number of different and interesting positions, some on the Chicago campus. I guess the pinnacle job for me there was the chair of the clinical PsyD program, and now I am the chair of the Master of Arts of Psychology program online.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. DC, can we hear you now?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. My name is Heather Sheets. I'm the campus dean here at Washington, D.C. Prior to coming to D.C., I was actually on the Chicago campus. In 2009, I was the campus APP director of training and had the internship consortium under me as well. Prior to coming to the Chicago School, I was at Northwestern as a psychologist who ran a substance abuse program for undergraduates and graduates on that campus. I'm delighted to be on the panel, and thank you.
Thank you so much. So I have a list of questions for the panelists, and it's very informal. Be asking them to all of our panelists, and if you feel so inclined to answer that question. At the end, we'll leave time for all campuses to ask any questions of our panelists. Perhaps to get started, we can talk a little bit about leadership and what do you feel defines good leadership? whether that be in academia, in psychology, any other area? What does leadership look like to you?
You're starting with me? I'm sorry.
Let's do it.
Good leadership is knowing when to take your cue.
I did one, so I appreciate your assertiveness.
All right, thank you. You know, I would start off by saying, to me, it starts with character. I truly believe that in any leadership position, you have to know who you are and what you stand for. And I know that that develops over time as we all grow and develop in and of ourselves as individuals. But I think you have to be guided by a set of principles, whatever we call them, values, morals, codes, because that directs you to where you're going to work as much as it directs you to how you're going to work and to serve while you're there. So having, I believe, a sense of character. And related to that, I would add that you really need to have the ability to self-reflect, because as you move in and out of positions, whether they're in leadership positions or whether you're being led by others, which I think good leaders allow themselves to be also, you have to be able to, on a daily basis, reflect in all candor on how did you do today. For me personally, that's my commute time. I have a 3-hour drive every day, so I spend my time mostly going home, really going through the day's events, and always asking myself, so when you get up tomorrow morning, are you going to do things the same, differently, and so on. So self-reflection for me is part of building my sense of character, and always keep that developing and growing. Other things I would add, just briefly, because you could spend an hour talking about this one question. I believe in facilitative leadership, and I also believe in service. I always say to people that I like to have around me people that are more experienced, smarter, diverse. And when I talk about diverse, I mean that in the broad sense, but I also mean cognitive diversity. Folks that won't just say yes, but people that will say and, however, what if, and really try to keep yourself in that position where you are facilitating good ideas and good actions as much as you are directing and leading them, and knowing the wisdom and the difference between the two. And the last thing I would say is that every day that I am in a position of leadership, I become more and more aware of having to set priorities, and setting those for yourself as well as the people that are working and facilitating the leadership responsibilities that we have as a team. But priorities that are driven by, in this case, an institution's mission. For me, part of what I try to do is make sure that I dedicate my time and energy to things that I can believe in, and subsequently guide the priorities in that direction.
Well, I think Dr. Neelan Woods really covered the spectrum. But the good thing is that she really hit on a lot of the things that I believe define a leader. The one thing that I would add to what she just said is on that reflection piece. I have found for myself that has been the core of being a leader for me, is having my own moral compass. You really do have to know who you are and what your values are to be able to lead successfully. And I have also found that being in a leadership position is really about building trust with the people that you work with, because you cannot lead if people are not willing to follow, and they will not follow if they do not have a belief in you. They have to be able to connect with you in some type of way, be it on a personal or professional level, and you have to have consistency as a leader. That's how you influence people and have people willing to work with you. And the one thing that I have learned is that being in a leadership position, it is not about you. It is about the constituents that you work with, that you represent, that you advocate for, that you serve. to use a word that Dr. Nealon Woods used, because really when you're in a leadership role, that is what you're doing. You are serving the people that rely on you.
Great, thank you so much. I saw a lot of heads nodding on the screen. Chicago, you're online. Anything else to add?
The one thing I would say, everything that Michelle and Cynthia, I don't know if you can control that.
I think Chicago, you might help briefly.
Am I echoing, Daniel?
You're good now.
Oh, okay, thank you. I would say I could just build on a couple of other points that were invoked by Michelle and Cynthia, and that is the whole point on authenticity. And authenticity comes through the self-reflection and the self-awareness, that groundedness in your very core of who you are. Because ultimately leadership is about relationships, and you are always in relationships as a leader. And again, whether it's a leader because you're in a position, or again, I believe that there's a leader in all of us, so we're always in some ways stepping out, trying to influence, trying to follow, and that to me comes about because we're in constant relationships, and that also requires caring. So when I think about leadership, it also means how we show that we care, and that brings people along as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Anything else to add for this particular question from panelists? Okay. Maybe to avoid the audio feedback, we can throw a question over to the Chicago campus for Dr. McPheeters and Jill Glenn. Let's talk about, so obviously this is a women in leadership panel, so one question we have is, does your identity as a woman influence your career and decision making? And if so, how?
So my identity as a woman, I would say that it has not necessarily influenced my career in terms of the path that I took, because I had a really good sense of where I wanted to be, and I didn't think so much that my identity as a woman had anything to do with that. But once I took on certain roles and got into the roles and kept climbing the ladder, then yes, identity started to really make a difference in terms of meetings and how others might perceive me as a woman, whether it's a man or another woman, the decisions that I make, if I'm in a meeting and the way in which I speak and respond to questions, yes, in that case, my identity as a woman came to play. But I would say that in terms of my path, my career path, no, my identity as a woman did not have an impact.
I guess I'll tell the story of when I felt like I really recognized that being a woman had an impact on who I was, and it has nothing to do with working at Chicago School. I was coaching a boys basketball team, and they were in the lead junior high at the time, and we were playing a team, and we ended up crushing them, which was beyond the point. But one of the things that happened was after the game, the coach that I coached against coached the 7th grade team and killed our team and was fine with that. But when we beat them, he was not fine with that. And we were going through the line shaking hands, he refused to shake my hand.
Wow.
And it was the first time I thought, wow, I never thought about being a woman and how that impacted so many things. And I think it really made me more aware of how often that happens and probably gets overlooked because I was just used to being kind of treated a certain way. And that was really thrown in my face that day, that I wasn't respected by him no matter how good I performed or how good my team performed.
Dr. Kelly or Arredondo, Anything else to add to that question?
I really appreciated what Belinda said about how being a woman at first didn't matter at certain kind of levels of her career path, but then once she got into more leadership roles, being a woman seemed to matter in a different way that it had not before. You know, I don't want to, I guess we risk kind of maybe moving into some stereotypical thinking about women. And of course, never having been anything but a woman, it's hard to sometimes know what it would be like to be, you know, I think about being watched as a leader, as a woman. Sometimes I think that women are watched as leaders in a way that may be unique to women, I don't know. But one of the things that I become aware of is, and Dr. Arradondo has mentioned this, is the relational factor of being a leader. And for me, it's been all about generativity. It's been all about raising up the next generation of leaders, or in our field, raising up the next generation of psychologists. And doing that in different ways throughout my career, both as a therapist, you know, wanting to, you know, help people one-on-one, but then especially as I moved into academia, trying to lift up and raise up the next generation of psychotherapists. And then now as a department chair, really nurturing the faculty who then are raising up the next generation of leaders. So I see it as kind of this hierarchy, or this kind of way of being generative across all those people, and all those people that I have the honor and the you know, the incredible honor of being able to touch and affect.
Great, thank you so much. Maybe a follow-up to this, as we are talking about identity, for anyone on the panel, does intersectionality of your identity play a role? So obviously identifying as women, but we all don't live in a silo of not just a woman today and a person of color the next day. So I'm just curious to see if that intersectionality of identity has a role in leadership positions here at the Chicago School or elsewhere.
I would say yes, that it does. And I think one of the other panelists just said something to the effect that, oh, I only see myself as a woman. I can't look at myself any other way. That's my only experience. But then when you layer in, oh, I'm a woman of color, I'm an African-American woman, I'm a Hispanic woman, I'm Pacific Islander, whatever, that brings in another worldview, another set of expectations. So I think if you are that self-aware, self-reflected leader, then you are looking at your actions through that prism, and you're also wondering if those outside of you are judging you based on their preconceived ideas of what they expect someone from your group to do or act, or how they should speak. So there is that in the back of the mind, that little awareness out there of how am I perceived.
Thank you.
I would add to
I'd like to build on what Cynthia said. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dr. No, please, Dr. Arradondo, do. Go ahead.
What I would just add, thank you, is that, you know, our intersectionality evolves over time, and, you know, I'm very fond of the identity literature, and I know our sense of identity becomes a little bit more cohesive with experiences, and being thrust into leadership roles or assuming leadership roles is a real test of who we are, because as Dr. Wharton said, we know we're being measured. I mean, there's no mistake about that because of our visible difference, for one thing. But second, what I'm very aware of is a lot of people have never reported, let's say, to a Latina. And that kind of discomfort to report to a person of color, a woman of color, I don't think is lost on me and probably some of my colleagues either. You know, I'm certainly used to reporting to individuals, both women and men, of the majority, but it's often not the case that it's the other way around. So I'm aware of that. You know, I think knowing what my responsibility is, that's what drives what I do as a leader. But I think, like Dr. Warden said, we can't underestimate the perceptions or projections others make as it relates to our multiple identities or our difference as women of color. Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Neelam.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Thank you, Dr. Arredondo. Very similar to Dr. Arredondo and Dr. Worthen's comments, and I still haven't figured this out because I'm still working my way through it. I'm trying to decipher what does happen when you move into a position of leadership. As Dr. Kelly said, people become focused on what you do and the decisions that you make and how you make them and so on. What I've become acutely aware of is that oftentimes, and I think this is part of the human condition, as people are observing and subsequently evaluating what you do in terms of your leadership position, they oftentimes will try to link that to other attributes that they're observing. So, and that's part of being human. You know, they look, obviously you're a woman and so on. But it has been curious to watch some of the assumptions or stereotypes, et cetera, about women as they emerge within that context. So oftentimes people will ask me about being an immigrant, and if that influences how I am as a leader and what I focus on. I don't think of myself as much as an immigrant as simply I was born and raised in another country. But the more that it's being asked of me, the more that I'm saying, how much of that is part of my identity and how does that shape my leadership? I've had several questions asked about my age, which, you know, I just think maybe the more wrinkles I get, maybe that will cease. But there's a lot of questions about my age, and more than anything, a lot of questions about people know that I have children. So I get asked mostly by men, but by a large number of women as well, about the choices that I've made as a woman. Even when people are in interviews, they ask me, how do I manage my schedule, given that I have a family? So I'm sometimes curious if that is a question that would be asked of men, is somebody a different age than I am, and so on. So what I've become increasingly aware of is that as you are, in my mind, working on a daily basis, doing your job, that others will come by and link your actions, your decisions, and so on to the various things that they also are assuming or knowing about you as a woman. So it's curious. I'll watch and observe how that moves on through.
That's so interesting. I want to layer in a couple of other identities, if I may. One of them is probably my key identity, and that is as a liberal Christian. I want to use the word liberal there, not the usual kind of Christian I think we see presented in the media. But through being a liberal Christian, I have kind of the whole Judeo-Christian tradition of leaders who are both flawed, very flawed, but also very selfless and obedient to a call, which we may call, you know, a true north, a sense of values and principles that Dr. Neelam Woods referred to earlier. But another identity that has been with me really most of my life is as a gay woman. And it's been as a gay woman that my path to learning about oppression firsthand opened up for me in a way that I never would have understood firsthand as a white woman and may have ignored as a woman. But as a gay woman, you know, denied a job because I was gay at one point, which then brought me happily to the Chicago School. I'm very mindful that for a certain period of my professional life, I was known as the lesbian psychologist or the lesbian faculty member, or the one, say, on a campus at another university where there wasn't a lot of diversity. I was the one that was always teaching the diversity courses. So as I said, that identity intersected with many, and again, I'm very grateful that it opened up that path to me understanding oppression in a way that I just never would have gotten with those other identities.
Thank you so much for sharing. Chicago or DC, anything else to add about intersectionality of identity?
For me, when I was on the Chicago campus in my first leadership role, I very quickly became pregnant with twins, and the identity of the role became merged with the identity of becoming a mother. And that happened similar to what Dr. Nealon Woods was saying in a very public way of people asking, you know, well, will you return to work? You know, how will you do your job with twins? And that was very shocking to me and surprising to me because I had never thought that the two wouldn't go hand in hand. And so as a first-time mother and being pregnant and being in a new leadership role and not being able to hide the fact that I was pregnant with twins, it was a shocking experience coming from the majority culture to have something so physical define me in a way and then be questioned. So that was it was a very humbling experience for me and was very challenging to work through.
Thank you so much.
Daniel, may I throw out one other concept that I think cuts across a lot of our comments here, and it comes from the work of Gloria Anzaldúa, an author, a feminist author, a lesbian poet, and she used the concept of the borderlands, and she was referring to herself in her experiences having to walk the borderlands as a Latina in South Texas, you know, which was a U.S. territory, of course, as being a lesbian, and in her own family, having to explain that identity part of herself. And for me, the borderlands probably are a great metaphor for a lot of the comments that have been made thus far about, you know, how we navigate. And, you know, our sense of ourself is what it is. And like what Dr. Sheets said, you know, all of a sudden people call out something that's really who you are. And then you have to kind of stop and evaluate you have to be different now, or you have to communicate different with some people. So this borderlands is this, I think, very cool concept that suggests that there could be fault lines whenever we're doing our work as women leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great insight. So as panelists here and as leaders at Chicago School, to a certain extent in your roles, you're serving as role models to whatever population that you're serving. And I'm curious if any of you had any role models that you looked up to that kind of shaped who you are today.
Hi, this is Belinda. I would say that my parents, number one, were my role models. They were involved in segregation in the 60s. They overcame a number of issues there, and they, I guess, instilled in us, my family, my siblings, just the will to overcome those types of challenges. Parents are both educated and made sure we understood that education was extremely important. So they are the two role models that I would say that had an early impact on my life.
I was struck by that question because as I thought about it, I thought about it not from the personal life, because of course when I look on the personal side, there was, you know, I come from a long line of very strong women that are very accomplished, but I was looking through it through the filter of professionally, because I did not see women like me in leadership roles when I was coming through. So I now find myself in the position of being this role model to the generation of women that have come behind me. So it's very disconcerting to find out that you are the role model, and that really there is really no one above you that can help you. I have found that my mentorship has come more through my colleague friends, that we have all kind of been on this path together. We are at different institutions. We've come up the ranks together, and we support and mentor each other, but that we did not have people within our career fields who were in those higher level positions that took an interest in us or actively mentored us. Any mentorship we received was through observation. It was not this intentional conversation or those professional development moments where someone will take you aside and share some knowledge or information that will help you down the line. So that's, yeah, very powerful moment there.
I would say ditto to what Dr. Wharton said. And, even I think we're a similar generation, which is why mentorship was not very pronounced in professional development organizations as it is now. And therefore, I looked inward as well to my parents and my grandmother, knowing what they accomplished, and it was watching what they accomplished, not being college graduates, not even being high school graduates, but knowing that goals were important. And those were the lessons that I took away from their modeling, so I observed all of that.
I think given that I was privileged to be educated by a generation of women that had navigated some of these hurdles that Dr. Arredondo and Dr. Worthen was talking about, I had the privilege of going to an undergraduate institution and then a graduate program where the leaders were women. And so I was able to really benefit from those women leaders who maybe went through without professional role models, who then took an interest in developing who I was as a student, as a graduate student, and then as an employee. And I really have benefited from all of the female supervisors that I've had and women in administrative roles in my own professional journey that have helped me get to the position I'm at today.
I would say for me that, similar to you, Dr. Worthen, when I read that question, I really thought about it for a long time to say, can you identify individuals that either were or currently are role models? And where I got to with that question was, no, I can't. Because I'm not sure that I ever thought about the world in that way as I was growing up and finding my way in the world. When I think through the people, however, that reared me and that were part of the community in which I was raised, so I was born in a very modest, large Irish family. Neither of my parents have a college degree. We were very Roman Catholic, very simple. For those of you that know anything about Irish folks, we're pretty poor and we're pretty simple, but we have a real sense of mission in the world, and I know that it is really anchored in our, not so much religious beliefs, but our sense of purpose as it is related to religion, spirituality, however you might define that. So I would say the people that influenced me more than my role models really were, we grew up absolutely immersed with the church. So every day, whether you were in your home or you were in your community or you were at school, you were surrounded by spiritual and religious leaders. So the priests and the nuns, they were our folks that we looked to, and what they taught you about life was that you do good things and that you do important things, but the last person that you do them for is you. Mm-hmm. That you find a way to contribute to the world. So the more I think about where I've become so focused over my life on service and character and values and purpose, I have to go back and give them credit for that was simply part of the culture that I was immersed in and that I was raised to respect and understand. And I'm almost 50, so I attribute any insight that I have in life to being close to 50. And that's my new one. And I thank you for the putting the question on paper, because really it goes back to the importance of the culture and the values in which we're raised, as much as it does the people that you meet along the way that influence and direct, whether we put that as a role model or the influencers in your life.
Great. Thank you so much. I, of course, want to leave time for those joining us on campus and online to see if there are any questions out there from folks. So if you're joining us online, feel free to chat those into the chat box. Are there any questions physically here on the LA campus? We have one question. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, my question directly relates to mentorship. So you directly or indirectly receive mentorship by role models or by figuring out on your own. But while you are in a position of leadership, do you see value in receiving executive coaching? And if yes, how do you see that being different for women leaders as opposed to men?
Was the question heard online for folks joining us online?
If you could repeat it, that would be great.
Sure. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the question was for the panelists if there is a benefit in terms of executive mentorship and how that might be, and what role does being a woman play in that, if any? Is that more or less what I'm hearing?
You know, it's how you define executive mentorship as well. I think there are different models of mentorship based on the organization you might be in. I think about it in the corporate world. And I think there's always room for, personally myself, to learn. And whether that's through a formal mentorship process or by discussion with other colleagues, I just think my learning continues. And so I guess that's just kind of the way I'm fudging the answer.
You know, I think there's a component that I want to identify to executive leadership. As I've experienced it, the one component that I want to pull out is that typically what happens in a corporate or even an academic setting where leadership training is offered, the component that has been most useful to me is the affirmation that somebody saw me as a leader and thought I was worth training. The training itself was not that useful. I mean, it was a bunch of facts. I probably could have gotten them from a book. But it was being affirmed as a leader. And that blew my mind because I've always been, believe it or not, kind of a reluctant leader. I've usually said no a number of times before I said yes. And yet each time I've been put in this role, I thoroughly love it, and I feel that my whole being kind of comes alive as I get to lead and have that kind of impact. So it's that folk tradition, is that, you know, how tribes and groups and communities call up their own leaders and affirm them as leaders, that has been really potent, and I think we need to pay attention to the leadership in everyone and call that out.
To piggyback on what Dr. Kelly was saying, I think what's been very beneficial to me in my position here on the DC campus has been the executive leadership that I've received from you know, for instance, Dr. Nealon Woods, that's been actually grounded in some of, you know, personal narrative. And so I think that's a useful component of executive leadership, where it's grounded in the narrative of your mentor or the person you're receiving that from, because sometimes it's gratifying to hear someone maybe wrestled with a similar topic that you wrestled with when you're looking at them thinking, well, she totally has this. She never had that experience. So thank you, Dr. Nealon Woods.
Very well.
Am I off mute?
You are off mute. You know, I would say, Azadeh, that I think your question is a wonderful question. And it goes back to something I said earlier, that I would challenge anyone that does not believe that they should remain open to being better, stronger, more astute, more directed in their leadership. And whether we break that down to how a person solves problems, to how a person sets priorities, to what a person wears, to how they speak publicly, any of those things, we always have to keep an eye open for ourselves and for others, and allow ourselves to be mentored and find opportunities to mentor others. To me, it's about, again, at this school, what is the mission of the institution, and how do we all work with each other and for each other to move an institution forward. I believe in the PhD programs we have, for example, in organizational leadership. Even when you put very skilled people together, people that are very experienced together, when you put human beings together, you have to pay attention to what are the conditions under which they can be successful and how they can move forward in good times, in not so good times, and so on. That in and of itself, is worth a coach, a mentor, and so on. For the Chicago Schools Executive Cabinet, we have worked on many occasions with an external person that is an expert in organizational leadership, especially as applied to the higher education setting. And we address everything from the rules of engagement with each other individually, the principles behind which we direct our leadership, how we approach strategic planning, you name it. And I would say that every one of those occasions, we've all come away saying, let's do more of that. So I think whether you're an individual, whether you're a team of leaders, whether you're an institution, surrounding yourself with learning opportunities is something that I can never see it getting old.
I want to give Chicago an opportunity for those on the Chicago campus to ask a question of the panel.
I think there's a response, and we have a couple questions online as well. I was just going to add that I've been fortunate to be a part of leadership where executive leadership is focused. And so just in response to the last question, feedback is one of the key pieces for a number of those executive leadership programs, and 360 in particular. So important to know what your direct reports think of your leadership, the individuals you work side by side, and then the managers, what your managers think of your leadership. So I just wanted to say, yes, executive leadership is extremely important, but particularly feedback that comes out of it.
I did see it online.
And there's a few questions online as well. Do you want to stop for those now, or shall we go to DC and then online?
Good question. Let's choose online. Question here: as a woman in leadership, at the end of the day, what would you say is or can be the biggest challenge?
Can you repeat
No
that?
pressure.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. So the question is, as a woman in leadership, at the end of your day, what would you say is or can be your biggest challenge?
I would say it is juggling all of the competing priorities, and that is the same no matter male or female in your leadership role. But I think as women, I think we struggle with that more than our male counterparts. Just based on my observation of male leaders, they don't seem to struggle with the, oh, I didn't get to this, or can I squeeze in one more thing? Then I attend to this issue over here. So for me, that is my challenge, is being able to set the priorities and not be apologetic about my priorities and getting them accomplished.
Challenge for our panelists, biggest challenge?
I guess an ongoing challenge for me, I tend to be much better with the big picture. And I have a relationship with the details that is typified by the statement, the devil is in the details. But the devil is in the details, including with the big picture. And so I find that the challenge for me is moving fluently back and forth between keeping the big picture in mind, the mission-centric focus, the institutional-centric focus, the excellence focus, and seeing all that really clearly in the big picture, the goal that I want to be part of, moving this institution toward. But then realize it's the everyday details that I need to attend to with students, with faculty, with courses. With online, there's a lot of technology issues that come up, and it's those details that can impede me sometimes from really leading toward the goal, the larger goals. And so it's balancing, it's getting that kind of rhythm that is a challenge for me.
Can send it over to DC to see if there's any questions on the ground at campus.
We don't have any questions here.
Were there any from the Chicago campus in person?
Yes, there is. One moment. I was just wondering, Chicago School has a lot of really wonderful role models that are women. And I was wondering if that environment allows it to be easier to be a woman and a leader here. And then the other thing is, I think, given the difficulties we've had over the last year, or actually September, if that has created, so it's kind of two parts, but if that's created a harder way to be a leader, because when you're under stress and you're working 3 jobs now instead of the 2 that you were doing before, which I think people were really working hard before and now are working even harder, if that really puts a strain on the leadership and how you can mentor others and the time that you had before to do that, and especially as a woman. So.
I'm happy to jump in on that one. I think being a leader, that stress is a normal part of being in a leadership position. And I've yet to meet a person that is in a leadership position that doesn't say that they have an element of stress. And of course, whatever that continuum is on is both individually based as well as situationally based, and it ebbs and flows. We are a school of psychology and related behavioral and health sciences. So one of the many things that I've observed and has also been brought to me from people that are newer to the institution is that when you are working at a school of psychology, there is also an interesting balance that ebbs and flows in terms of some people that come in that are newer will say, this institution spends a lot of time talking about process and experiences and so on. And I think that's part of the course of being around many mental health professionals. I do think that part of people's collective leadership is about, in times that are stressful and times that are even not, you have to be able to set priorities and have people focus on what are the priorities and have those also shift and change based on the one thing that we know is a given in life, and that is that there's constant change. Now, to the first part of the question, if you can repeat it, about being a woman, you said in terms of, because there are so many women here, is it a little bit easier? Was that the question? I'm not getting confirmation of that, but I do think partly, oh, maybe it's coming.
Yes, that is the question.
Okay, thank you so much. You know, again, like everything, I think you could say yes, no. Part of what I've learned about being around so many women, and we do have a lot of women as employees, we also have a lot of men as employees. We do have 80% of our student body is women, 20%, of course, of our student body are men, and a growing number of our students identify as transgendered, something that is our institution that we are also growing in our understanding of managing an added layer of diversity that we're responsible to manage too. So part of, in my opinion, and I'm curious about the other panelists as well, part of being with women is that there does seem to be a forum where we can have conversations that are quite unique to women and perhaps are facilitated as a result of the way that women perceive and interact with the world and with each other in that regard. I would also say, however, that many of us women have conversations about how women support or sometimes don't other women. And we've had that conversation at the leadership level, and we also have it with that conversation with students and their relationships with each other. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question with any layer of decisiveness, because some of these things really ebb and flow, and they're also very much determined by the people that are in the room at the time, as well as the situations that they're dealing to in a psychology school.
One more question.
Can I answer that question? Sorry, Daniel.
Oh, go ahead.
I would just say that the school did have a time where they put out an email through HR, which was wonderful, that if you wanted to mentor someone or be a mentor, you could. So I signed up for that, and I was given a mentee, but they said they couldn't find a match for a mentor. And I told the HR person, well, here's who I would want to be my mentor if I had to pick one. And they went directly to that person and said, absolutely. And so I think a lot of it, especially for women, is asking. I think men are better at networking, asking a little bit more, and we probably don't do as good a job because we think, well, I'm really busy, so I'm sure they're really busy, so I don't want to ask them to do something for me. And it's been extremely beneficial for me to be mentored and get support, and I would recommend to anyone out there that sometimes you just have to do the ask to get what you want.
We're on time, but there are some questions online those that didn't get answered afterwards. To end our conversation, what good advice is those kinds of stuff?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Sure. So the question was, what advice would you need us today for how to be successful in your based on your experiences or something that you felt you missed out on in your developmental process as a leader?
I would say that for me and what I try to do every day, the best piece of advice I could give is that you have to listen, regardless of what your position is, but particularly as a leader, because you do have an incredible amount of responsibility in making the decisions, but to get the right information, you have to be willing to listen. Even if you may disagree with what the person is saying, you have to start from a position of always listening and being open to feedback.
I would add to that there should be a personal definition of what success looks like, so that you're not constantly measuring yourself against this other person or other standard, that you know for yourself, success for me looks like. That's how you know if you've achieved it, because you know what you're looking for, and not rely on someone else's definition of success.
My advice would be find something you believe in and is consistent with who you are as a person, and then work very hard to put all of those pieces together.
Know yourself, non-defensive listening, and having a sense of true north, and being patient with yourself and with others.
Probably already mentioned that, say, quick to listen, slow
observe, and reflect. I would go with, if anybody knows yourself, surround yourself with good people. Really never the smartest person in the room, so let them.
Bye. We're out of time today, but thank you so much to all of our panelists and Ashley for joining us. And this session has been recorded and should be posted in the coming weeks on the Careers website for any of those that were able to. So thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.